like to welcome everyone to our webinar today, which is how to personalise customer interactions, which I think is going to be a fascinating discussion we're going to have. And there's been a sort of one-size-fits-all approach to contact centres, predominantly over the last few years, perhaps with a sort of VIP line. It's now much more easy to give a personalised customer service, and I think it's will do the industry a lot of good if we can start to do that. So I'd like to introduce to you two speakers who are going to be joining us today.
Now, where does that all sit in terms of exploiting that? Well, it's interesting that if you dig into the patent library over wherever they hold it in the States, and you go looking for Amazon, you will notice that as far back as 2012, they recognized the power of knowing your buying habits as a customer, and they patented something called anticipatory package shipping. And that really is based on all the things that they know about you, such as previous orders, product searches, wish lists, shopping carts, returns, even how long you hover over a particular item. And they add all that up and they say, in a predictive context, there is a great likelihood that Jonty is now going to buy this next thing. And on that basis, they will then forward ship, potentially, that item either to you directly or at least to a local hub on the anticipation that that's what you're next going to be buying. And of course, that offends our sense of uniqueness greatly, but in reality, we are creatures of habit.
Yeah. And
that can be analysed in terms of patterns.
Well, I think as we get towards the Internet of Things, it becomes more capable to say, yes, for instance, washing powder would be quite a good one, because that always wins out to the most inconvenient
doesn't it, just
time. Yeah. Where your washing machine could tell the internet you've done 18 washes, and so you need a certain top up of washing powder.
Yes,
would actually be a very useful service.
Well, actually, we had a webinar a while back on that, and I know that New Voice Media is experimenting with this, aren't you? Where you're connecting some of the signals that are coming via the cloud for the Internet of Things, and you can route that to an advisor at the end of the day.
We can. I mean, we're not quite going all the way to automatically ordering something at the end of it, but being able to talk or being able to highlight maybe your laptop fan is going too fast or brakes are needing to be, that was actually one of those examples. So, brake pads on cars are coming up, so you can pre-order those brake pads, so that when the service is coming in, you know that that's going on, and starting to automate some of those rote activities.
Yes.
So that agents are freed up to do not rote activities.
Yeah. So that's important, and I mean, I think that will take some time to roll out as all of those product sets, our toothbrush down to our tyre is connected in that way, but it sets an expectation that the world is going to anticipate our requirement, and that's the world that we're kind of trending into. And as this slide here says, refrigerators that can tell you when it's time to buy more milk, smart TVs that predict which show to record, and the kind of Google Now software. Actually, it's interesting. Anybody in the audience using Google Now? I'd be interested to hear anything from you in terms of, does that add to your life? Is it spooky? I certainly haven't turned that on, but if you're willing to allow Google to see a 360-degree view of you, but that's putting a face here.
I've tried it. Didn't quite do that.
Yeah. For anyone in the audience not familiar with Google Now, do you want to just a quick run through what it is?
Well, really what they're doing is to say, look, if you allow us, and we are trusted in this context, to know what you're doing in terms of maybe Google Mail, what you're doing in terms of the searches, let us see what's happening in terms of your contacts, your diary, all of that. We can analyze that and then push you useful comments. I mean, you see it in they're all doing the same. I mean, Apple with Siri, for example. It's interesting if you listen to the comments about what the next operating system is going to do. They think that rather than try and report on everything, they're going to move to an exception-based model. Because now we know about what? We know about your basic work habit. We know about your listening habits, as far as music is concerned, certainly. That's coming through, your fitness, the whole thing. So what we can now do is report back to you in terms of exception-based reporting. So Google Now is a version of this intelligent assistant that supposedly sits behind you as a digital shadow, making these little suggestions to you, prompting you, you need to be here in 15 minutes, you need to be there, is a better suggestion. But it's a bit klutzy, is it still?
So far, I think it's a bit new.
Yeah.
Well, Well, Ricardo says I use Google now every day and fully embrace it. It saved me time and money and genuinely brought to my life a lot of benefits.
Really?
So,
is that based in the UK or US?
I think Ricardo Sheffield, isn't he?
I think that's why you mentioned you were Ricardo, so
Yeah.
it'd be interesting. Karen says Google now is great when it works. I find more time logging back into my account as I switch between devices, as it doesn't enjoy staying logged in. Ricardo,
that's interesting.
It's in the
Perpetual state. Yeah. Okay. So early days.
Yeah.
But again, if we sniff that and go, what would that look like when it all joins up and works perfectly well?
Yeah.
The direction is clear in terms of where we're all headed strategically. Now let's have a look at needs and history. And this is something dear to my heart, which we've talked about before when working here over at the new Voice Media camp. And it's because routing is often done very much from an inside-out perspective. You can think about it the other way around in terms of the situation the customer is in. And we were discussing this, in fact, during the rehearsal. And it was Emma that piped up and said, "Ooh, but we can really do this fantastic thing."
Right.
And we were talking about the fact that the connection between a customer coming in, the information that we have collected in the CRM, in this particular instance it's Salesforce, but all the little data fields that we collect about you, and what can happen in that very small amount of time actually between the customer turning up and let's say we know about them and we can trigger it because it's a common mobile number. So we can go into that CRM and then gather something as a result of that. And it was all to do with this tagging thing. So Beth, do you think you can unpack that a wee bit for the audience and explain what those different symbols means and actually what you might be able to do with it?
Sure. So rather than, we've been doing data dips and routing based on data for a long time, and we've had a lot of conversations about this. You might be able to choose one field and decide what matters is that they're a gold customer, or what matters is that they're I don't really drive a car, but a Ford driver, and therefore we need to go, I'm just trying to think of a brand. But what we're able to do now is move away from that always being rules-based and being quite one field at a time. And in our new routing engine, you can apply lots of different attributes for one person because we're not all one thing. We're not always necessarily the gold customer, or maybe gold customer is important, but a different customer is much more important because you have you're going into a new area, you need to win customers in a different area, whatever it is. And also just all of us, we're lots of different people at one time.
Yep.
So you can decide which of those attributes you want to tag somebody as, and then choose how you route based on multiple attributes, and weight which one is more important at that time, and then route in that direction. So it also means that you can get rid of the IVR, get that personalized experience. And so as an example is, I might not be a gold customer, but I'm clearly a disgruntled customer, and I've been phoning in 14 times in the last few days. The last thing in the world I want to do is go through another IVR.
Indeed.
And to be able to go to somebody who is high on the empathy scale, understands, capable of solving my problem, and when I'm there spitting, and actually goes, well, hi, so sorry about these last 14 times, see the trail of conversations, I can't apologize enough, let's solve your problem, it's going to diffuse the situation in a way that we can now provide, and rather than me going through this entire horrible IVR again, which maybe at the end of it would say, oh, by the way, I can see this trail, and maybe be somebody who doesn't have a lot of empathy. So what we're working on, or what we have now, is that type of ability. So you're personalizing in real time, and you're personalizing from the start of the journey and not by the time you talk to an advisor.
Fantastic, that's really clear, and that's actually pretty advanced, that's interesting stuff. So in terms of the number of fields, because if I'm looking at the screen there, I'm presuming that we're talking about what? That symbol represents the channel, is it?
So it could be the channel, it can be lots of different things.
Okay.
So it can be, the channel or the history, it can be the language that I'm speaking, it can be whether or not I'm a VIP, do I have an open case, do I have lots of open cases, do I have a renewal due? These are all just examples, it doesn't have to be those.
No, so it's any combination of fields we've got within the record.
Yes, and because we can route on any field within Salesforce, it's not just the fields that we can think of, it's whatever fields our customers think are important for their customers.
Yeah.
So we're living what we're breathing what we're living,
No.
teaching. So
presumably, if I'm going to use this functionality, then what I'm doing is I'm sitting down and deciding what combination of fields I want to use in order to drive through sort of personal experiences.
Yes. Yeah? So which combination of fields are most important to my customers and my consumers?
And I think the automatic tagging is as nice here. It's rather than having to put it into the CRM system, it's automatic. Another sort of good example is that one of the questions we asked a lot is, what's the best time for an outbound call? Well, if someone's made an inbound call into you, that's probably giving you an idea of when is the suitable time to put an outbound call. So if they call you in the lunch break, that's the time to reach them, rather than perhaps during Coronation Street when they may not appreciate a call back. So it's using some of that automatic tagging to generate preference.
And by the way, in this world, which comes back to this definition of digital being using information in real time, as I understand it, those are automatically generated and then they disappear once they've been used for that one instance. In other words, it's just, in the moment. Tagging.
Well, what's the relevance of that moment?
Yeah.
And so you can choose different tags for different times.
Different circumstances. Okay, so that's a good example there. It's all to do with, I guess, getting people to develop their sensitivity towards the fact that there are different types of people who behave in different sorts of ways. And if you just see there the definitions of feeler, entertainer, controller, and thinker, what's been interesting in this particular deployment of it over at British Gas is that all of the advisors there have gone through this particular workshop and have been challenged to think about themselves in terms of those choices. And on the desk, they are now labelled as feeler, entertainer, thinker, etc., etc. And it helps them to identify their own core preference and their own core strength, and allows them then to tune in to the way in which customers are also preferring to communicate and engage. And the result being then is that you're more likely to be appropriate. So this is another way of looking at it. And here's just a couple of examples. If you know, for example, that your customer is much more orientated towards a feeling approach, I mean, if you use NLP language, that's a kinesthetic approach, for instance, you really empathize with what matters to them from that perspective, and you don't be overly bossy or too sort of process orientated as far as that language is concerned. There's one little example scenario. And here's another one, which is kind of the opposite, I suppose, which is somebody who's much more on the moment, on the point, just wants it all to happen. And the last thing they want is a long piece of sharey stuff. They just want the stuff to get sorted. Now, again, I think that most of us who would consider ourselves to be effective communicators would start to tune into that and intuitively do it. But I thought it was an interesting thing to make that much more explicit and then presumably spread that skill across a much broader base of people. And I bothered to take a look at the in-depth case history they wrote about that on the site, and they really got some significantly impressive results coming through from that, and it did drive their NPS scores very, very high as a result of the fact everybody is much more tuned into this.
Yeah.
So I see some real benefits on that one. I don't know, did you, because you'd heard of it before? And
yeah, when you sit there, I think it's very much that, just recognising that the split between the controller and the entertainer. So the controller just phones out, I've got this problem, just sort it for me.
Yeah.
Doesn't want a long conversation.
Yeah.
The entertainer, you probably get some clues from them, is much happier to have a longer conversation, talk about the weather, other things such as that will take longer on a call, so we'll respond to that better. So it's just adapting, it's sort of a different way of mirroring, and also recognising what your own personal style is.
Yes.
And saying, I naturally do this controller, put it into the system, I'll sort it as quickly as possible, where someone may not want that.
It's not just it's the how as much as the outcome.
Very powerful.
It's like mindful customer service.
Indeed, and it's a great summary. Mindful, absolutely right. Maybe situation. If you've got that screaming customer where they're really upset, how are you going to talk to them? Is it automatically Mr. and Mrs.? Are you going to be cheeky and try to call them by a shortened name or whatever? And this is where it really came from. Jonty, here's your chance to confess now. Because it's interesting. Do you talk to them as Ms. Jones, Mrs. Jones, Catherine, or does it get to be Katie? And it comes out of a thing, Jonty?
Yeah, it's one of those interesting ones about the best way to address people, because if your name, everyone knows me as Jonty, but my full name is Jonathan. So I was on a call centre one day, and the agent said, "You're right to call me Jonathan." And I thought, well, I said yes because it sort of didn't want to be this blunt, but it kind of was an idea of they didn't ask me how I'd prefer to be addressed. It was, do you mind? And similarly, hospitals are pretty bad on this, where people perhaps have their middle name is what they're known as. So they say, "Oh, hello, Florence. How are you?" And it's like sort of a bit bemused because they're known to everyone as Joyce. Yeah. So it's quite an interesting one of making assumptions.
Yeah. So it can be powerful if you get it right. It can be rubbish if you get it wrong at the end of the day.
First tip that we've got is from Amanda, and she says sending out personalised birthday cards to clients is always a nice touch. I imagine this isn't hard to automate in a system if you get it right, Beth?
Absolutely not. You just need to somebody to do the actual your supplier, but you can serve the information.
But that can be nice. That's a nice touch.
Yeah.
That's a nice touch. Yeah.
Brilliant. We've had another tip in from Alex, and he says, we have a very good CRM system in Bulgaria that routes callers through to the first customer rep that they dealt with. It records the previous problem and issue, so they always deal with the same person.